Bishops, would you like to have a question or two?
Sure.
Conversation.
We're ready when you are.
Okay, we are going to ask them in the order in which we received them. And this one was actually sent to us ahead of time, asking if there is any way we can celebrate Holy Communion when we are attending only virtual services. If there is a way to Holy Communion at home. Can the wine and bread be virtually blessed by our priests when conducting a virtual service?
I'll go first, and Bishop Ann, feel free to add. This is a great question, and one that has been on the forefront of our conversation here in this diocese, and particularly among your bishops, Bishop Ann and me, ever since the early on in the pandemic time. The short answer to your question is, technically speaking, at this time, that is not permitted. However, that does not mean that it isn't a vitally important conversation in the work that we share and the leadership we're providing. But the directive that it is not currently authorized has come from the House of Bishops. While we try and sort out what ways we will be able to adopt into our practice as a church in the days to come. There is strong feeling on both sides of this question within the House of Bishops. The conversation stalled a bit. So one of the ways that we're trying to respond in this diocese is on a limited basis to look at possible models that move us in that direction without explicitly authorizing the blessing of consecration of the elements over the internet or through these channels. There was a bishop in the church who early on did authorize that, but was asked to step back from that practice. And we have all been asked to not allow that practice until further conversation has taken place. We are in these models that we're developing locally, we are sending them to the appropriate body, the committee that meets between conventions that oversees our liturgy and our practice in order to offer these and to re-engage the wider church in this conversation. The bottom line is we're not free to act unilaterally on this particular decision. Bishop Ann has been a part of a panel that was convened as a subset of the House of Bishops, and I know she's been deeply involved in these conversations. Bishop Ann.
Thank you, Bishop Sam. What I would add to that is I'll tell you what's been helpful for me, because I obviously, for all of us in various ways, to have been removed from the practice of receiving, for the practice of being in the physical presence of those we love as we receive the spiritual presence of the Lord that we serve, has been enormously painful. I hope that some of what you saw this morning was comforting as you see really enacted the way that in many ways, we are setting a table, a holy table in the wilderness, and the variety of ways that that's done. My own sacramental theology is that the two great sacraments of baptism and Eucharist are really revelations of the sacramental nature of all of life, that there are windows into how we can approach seeing the sacredness everywhere in these sacraments of the church. So what I want to propose as we continue to work our way through the sacramental liturgical rite of the Eucharist is to think about our Lord with the 40 days of fasting in the wilderness that he was sent to. And this nature of not being able to nourish ourselves in the ways that we have become accustomed to and really quite dependent upon should both highlight our gratitude for the gift of the Eucharist, as well as ask us, what will this fasting tell us that's new and surprising? And remember, at the end of the fast, the Lord sends the angels, that God, the Heavenly Father, sends the angels to Jesus to comfort him. So I think that's where we're trying to figure out, is that we're in this wilderness. At times we feel it's a very lonely place, but at times we understand that we're in a communion of saints to do that, but that God is setting some kind of table and inviting us not only to that table, but to help set it for others. And I found those things to be very helpful while we try to figure out these other questions of, could we make the rite of Holy Eucharist more accessible in some new ways, as we have seen done as we continue to live in this pandemic season.
Thank you, Bishops. That was a wonderful answer to a topic I know that means a lot and rests heavy on the hearts of a lot of folks who are worshiping at home. I have another question that came in on Facebook from a parishioner at Grace Clayton. We are attempting outreach via social media, mostly Facebook, and would like to know what the diocese is doing and how we can tie into what is already being done.
So in some respects, the person asking the question might be better equipped to answer that than the bishops. We have a fantastic communications team in this diocese that has actually led the way, not only in this diocese, but in the wider church, in terms of engagement with social media and putting the missional and worship life of the church in the public eye through social media. So there really is, and today is just another example of how we're living into that promise and that opportunity. As you may have heard in part of the presentations this morning, we're trying to proactively equip our congregations with better equipment, better training, better understanding of how to use these tools and these channels to get the gospel word out, to share the good news of Jesus, to share the mission of what it means to become beloved community. And so we're really all in with that at the diocesan level, but we are also working with congregations to support them in opening up those pathways and those avenues. Our communications team convenes regularly with folks from our congregations across the diocese in regional small groups to talk about the opportunities and the challenges of communication in this day and age, and using all these different pathways, opportunities, and channels. So there's a tremendous amount that's going on. I'm going to open it up not only to Bishop Ann, but to Christine and Summerlee, because I'm sure I haven't covered the whole landscape of what we're providing.
I'm just going to very quickly add, the best starting place of all is the electronic newsletter, Please Note, that comes, you sign up for it on our diocesan webpage. And Please Note always has links to social media, to other places to find information. But as far as a networking tool to see and know evangelism, reconciliation, Christian formation, racial reconciliation, all of the things we're talking about today, every week, a treasure trove of opportunities comes through Please Note. But I am often finding diocese announcements on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. And those are great, and they overlap. It's kind of fun to watch the different feeds and see how our diocesan feeds touch on your local feeds and how they all direct us to a really great concert of witness in the wider community.
Do you all want to add anything?
Sure, always. So talking about communications, it's hard to stop me, but yes, and thank you both for that. And I will echo Bishop Ann's shout out to seeing things in our church's different communication channels. We have a wonderful, wonderful network of parish communicators that we hold very near and dear, and we work very closely together, which is why we're actually very excited. This is a little bit of a challenge to answer in terms of asking about outreach, one specific thing, because there are a number of things and it all depends on what you need in terms of outreach. I don't want to give away anything that's going to be happening later on today, but we do have an opportunity for a diocesan-wide campaign that is going to be happening. And this is going to be a great opportunity to see how all of our channels can tie together and everybody can plug into them. So stay tuned. I want to say it's after our breakout sessions are done that we'll be hearing more about it. So yes, I'm going to leave it with a teaser. Keep the suspense going. So our next question also comes in from Facebook. And the question asks, how can we be church together and do worship? How we are church together and do worship has been changing in the past decades. How do you see the effects of the pandemic moving us forward in new ways that are sustainable?
I'm going to give Bishop Ann a chance to go first this time.
So I've heard this said, thank you for that question. It is such a great question. And I've been hearing this observation far and wide. In some ways, which is too often the case, a particular crisis has forced us into some new behaviors that we've actually needed to do for a long time. And so I will just say this, speaking personally, I think for too long, the Episcopal Church has been waiting for people to come through our doors and has been somewhat reluctant to get into the world of online evangelism and communication and all of that. And so the bishops, we've been saying really from the beginning that while the online opportunities are important right now, that those should remain options even after the pandemic is over, even after we're welcoming people back into our churches. We know that your churches are reaching, I loved what the advocate calls the diaspora. They're reaching your members who no longer live close to your church, maybe another part of the country. We know through the analytics that our worship services are now reaching across the world and people are being brought into the church. That's not going to be the only way when we continue to be able to be in worship, but learning how to mix music, mix choir, virtual choir, how to reach people who have to stay home because of other kinds of limitations, haven't been at church at years. So in a way, we've been given a bit of a kick in the backside, a fast forward into a future that we were headed toward anyway. I also think it's been great that we can see and celebrate that there's no one best way to do worship. There are many great ways to do worship, all within the living tradition embodied in the Book of Common Prayer. So we're more available and accessible than ever, and that should just continue to increase after the pandemic, I think.
Thanks. Yes, the only thing really I would add is the hybrid world that Bishop Ann is describing is one of the particular opportunities of the pandemic that have really invited us to embrace something that, as she said, we may have avoided for a time. I'll just tell a quick story. When my first time ever in North Carolina was actually for a wedding. It was down in Wilmington. And it was, for some of you know, he's an Episcopal priest and a wonderful cartoonist. He does the cartoons for the church pension group calendar, Jay Sidebotham. I was here for his wedding with some friends from New York City and friends from Virginia Seminary. And we all rented a car together and we were driving to the place where we were supposed to stay, and we got a little lost. And I was driving and I kept thinking, oh, here's our turn. And then that wasn't the turn. And I kept changing lanes and I got pulled over by a policeman. And when he pulled me over, he asked to see my license. He saw that I was not from around here. And he took pity on me and he gave me a warning. And then he said to me before he went back to his car, Mr. Rodman, stay in your lane. Well, that stayed with me. And I think it's a little bit of a metaphor for the way the Episcopal Church has for too long tried to stay in a particular lane. And this pandemic has invited us to actually change lanes and recognize that we can operate in several lanes at the same time. I think there's a gift ahead of us. I think there are many opportunities there. I think we're still on the front end of that learning curve. But it does circle me back to that first question about why we are not yet able to offer the sacraments in this format. And I think that will be a question that we will return to, and a question that we need to wrestle with as part of what it means to live in this hybrid world, and to offer not only the gospel, but the sacraments in a hybrid world.
Well, thank you, bishops. So we had a question come in asking if you can share how last rites are being handled in this very challenging time, and how particularly congregate care settings, and how also we have been dealing with other pastoral care challenges.
Sure. I'll go first this time, unless you want to jump in, Bishop Ann. So in the first sort of phase of the pandemic, it was really difficult and painful because we were not, due to the public health and safety measures that were being implemented by the state, we really were not able to visit not just people with COVID, but with anyone who was on their deathbed. We were prevented from making pastoral visits and pastoral calls because there was so much that was still unknown about the virus and how it was transmitted. And there was also, as you may remember, at that point, a shortage of protective equipment. And we wanted to make sure that the frontline workers in the healthcare system particularly had access before those of us who are in a pastoral role. And not that those two are mutually exclusive, but that was the priority in that time period. Since then, of course, we've learned a lot, and we've learned a lot more about how the virus is transmitted, although there's still some questions and some mysteries in this pandemic. The protective equipment has become more widely available, and manufacturing has stepped up to meet that demand. Not that there aren't still shortages, but that has allowed us now to provide last rites for people. In that first phase, it was often done over the phone or through video calls, FaceTime, and other means to make a connection, to offer prayers. Occasionally, people would be able to come to someone's home and do it outside their window, through the window. But now we are able, with the right protections, protocols, and so forth, in most instances, unless it's a particular facility where there's still limited access, we can come in person and provide last rites. I myself had the opportunity to do that in the summer for one of our priests who did not die of COVID, but was near death. And within the last week of his life, I was able to be there and provide both last rites and communion to him and to his son who was caring for him in their home. So thanks be to God, we are in a different place now, and we will not be stepping back on, even if we go back into lockdown, those pastoral services will still be offered and provided.
I'll add one thing, Bishop Sam,
Please.
if that's okay. In addition, so two things I want to add. In addition, one of the things that we're mindful of is different clergy have some of their own health limitations about where they can go in specific situations. So one of the really powerful things that's happened is, particularly in the case of last rites, if there's maybe a parishioner has a clergy member who's unable because of their health condition to go into a particularly difficult situation, but we have that kind of network that can send somebody else. So if we have a clergy person in charge of a congregation, a solo pastor, but he or she has a health compromised condition that would make it unadvisable to go into a certain facility that you can otherwise go into, that's where we partner. So there's a lot, again, more of collaboration and communication amongst our chaplains, amongst our clergy colleagues, to make sure that where that call comes in, we can get somebody there under the best possible circumstances. The other thing I want to add about pastoral care which I'm sure you know, is that pastoral care does not belong just to the clergy. And one of the things that's been very gratifying to see is how parishioners take care of each other in terms of finding ways to show, drop off things on front porches, mail cards, make calls. There's a lot of pastoral care happening person to person. Pastoral care teams have organized entire rosters of calls and visits, safely protocoled visits, to make sure that those contacts. That said, I still think there's a lot of worry about people who are drifting away or getting lost. But it won't be because vestries and pastoral care teams haven't gone to the utmost ends of the earth to figure out where all the sheep are and how all the sheep are doing. And it's been, again, gratifying and inspiring to see the effort put into pastoral care.
Thank you, bishops. And I think everybody will join me in saying that the two of you have made all of us feel very cared for since this whole thing started, and we thank you for it. Our next question seeks your advice. Any advice on adapting the holidays this year while still holding what is sacred?
Well, that one's tailor-made for Bishop Ann to start with.
Oh dear, I'm not sure. Well, I will say the things that the youth department, I don't know if this is what you're thinking about, Bishop Sam, but what Amy Campbell with the Children and Families Department has done to make holidays there's a Faith at Home series, and you go to our website, you can look at Faith at Home. The things that they're doing for Advent are remarkable. Whether it's kits that are mailed to homes, or godly play that's done online, or sort of our own YouTube how-to channels, a wreath making party across the land. There's this, or sort of like those of us who've watched enough cable have learned how to watch interactive, here's how to. So we kind of have our own little how-to networks they're beginning to roll out. So the other things happening during Advent, particularly that I know about, I want to call your attention to, is Rabbi Raquel Jurovics, who is our rabbi in residence. She's done a lot of programming with us over the course of this pandemic period. We'll be doing a series with her and a Dharma leader who grew up Methodist but is now Buddhist, on Breathe on Me, Breath of God, the breath of God, whose breath and whose life, looking at the spirit as breath in the Jewish, Christian, and Buddhist traditions. So that's a 2-part Advent series. The other thing is that it's kind of in the hopper, it's in research and development, but Bishop Sam and I are developing some collaborations through which we hope to bring you Advent lessons and carols and Christmas lessons and carols. So it's, who knew that we would, just be milking highways, byways, and online ways to be in your homes and with you during the holidays.
Just a couple of quick things to add. Thanksgiving, which of course comes up on Thursday, and I know many of you are in the same situation with this. We have, for as long as I've been married, which is 35 years plus, spent Thanksgiving with my wife's family. And this will be the first year in our married life where we won't be with them. The last 10 or so years, it's been with her sister. They're in Philadelphia. We're not going. The irony, one of my favorite Thanksgiving hymns, "We gather together," we're not gathering. And many of you are not as well. We've taken the guidance from the CDC not to travel. Some people will travel, and God bless them. And my choice is just my choice. I'm not pushing that on anyone else, but I'm recognizing that many of you have had to make the same choice for different reasons. And that's hard. And I know we will Zoom with our family. We will, connect through these other channels. The one thing I'm hoping, and it's on the front end, is it'll be the first time in 35 years that Debbie and I actually cook a turkey in our home, because we never host. And that might be fun. And it might be fun, while we will certainly miss our wider family, there might be some special gifts that God has in store for us when it's just the two of us. And I hope that people who are either not able to be with family or in fact alone, I hope that the parish community is connecting with you and reaching out and finding ways to keep you company in this time when we can't gather and can't travel. Just a quick footnote on the Advent offerings. One of them that is through the channel that Bishop Ann already mentioned is from one of our deacons, Rick Ziegler, who created this wonderful Advent program for children and sent it to us for our review. And I liked it so much, I said, this isn't just for kids. I'm adopting it for my Advent this year. So, you know, your creative energy and the ways that people are finding to respond in this time are going to help us through this holiday season that'll be unlike any most of us have experienced in our lifetime. So that's our hope and prayer. Last but not least, our churches, we're working with our churches now locally to find ways for you to be able to spend time during Christmas in your sacred spaces. We know that that will look radically different because we can't put more than 10 people in our buildings right now in the church, according to the latest directives from the governor. And we're going to try and work within those limitations creatively to find a way to give you that special moment, that holy time in the spaces that for you are really at the heart and the center of your spiritual and faith journey. So stay tuned for some creative models about how to do that in the weeks between now and Christmas.
Bishop Sam, I'm just going to add one more thing. So while I'm doing Zooming with all of y'all, my husband is actually cleaning out the garage because we're going to set up Thanksgiving in the garage for our 9 people and have the garage door open because it's supposed to rain on Thanksgiving Day. So we're going to have a very unusual Thanksgiving, but we thought and it's immediate family, but we just have a big immediate family. So it'll be Thanksgiving in the garage. We'll have to see. Door open.
It'll be memorable, right? Different is memorable.
Bishop Ann, it sounds like you're almost recreating the Charlie Brown Thanksgiving. Didn't that start with the stuff coming out of the garage?
I forgot about that. I better go review.
Watch out for the folding chairs. They get mean. Bishop Sam, I'd like to welcome you to the world of turkey makers. Now that you guys are going to be making your turkey this year, I think you might find it's the gift that keeps on giving, because you may enter the perennial and forever never ending conversation of the best way to cook a turkey, when it should be cooked, at what temperature it should be cooked. So welcome. So we have another question, more advice seeking. Our clergy and lay leaders over the last, I have lost count how many months, have been tireless in their caring for their congregations, their neighbors, their friends, their families. What can we do to support our clergy and lay leaders to know that they are loved and to help them make sure self-care is as much of a priority for themselves as they are asking it to be for us?
You're very loud.
So this is really at the heart of what it means to be beloved community right now. And thank you for asking that question, because our clergy are very much on our hearts, and we see day to day, week to week, the toll this is taking on them. And we know you see it too. And we're grateful that you see it, because not everyone sees it. In an attempt not to make light of this challenge, but to just frame it a little bit humorously, I saw a Facebook social media posting, and it was a picture of your clergy person in 2019 and your clergy person in 2020. And the 2019 picture was Tom Hanks as Fred Rogers. And the 2020 picture was Tom Hanks in the movie Castaway. And if you remember that movie, you can appreciate the contrast. And while it is at one level helps to put a lighter face on what has been a tremendously demanding and draining year. And there have been multiple articles written about the danger of clergy burnout. It's just to be clear, that's true for lay leaders too. It's not just for clergy. And everything that I'm saying here applies to our devoted, faithful, and really outstanding lay leaders in this diocese. We have to care for each other, and we have to become aware of what the signs are that there's some burnout or some need for rest, or just the indicators that somebody is overfunctioning, which is one of my sort of key dysfunctions when I try to work through a difficult time. But there are many signs, and the Christian Century article is very helpful because it invites all of us as communities of faith to look for those signs and not to be afraid to speak out when you see them, and say to your brother or sister or your pastor or your senior warden, how can I help? Or what can we do so you can get some downtime? Or you really need a break. Let me take this off of your plate. And I can't emphasize enough how important those conversations are. And that's something that we've tried to do here as a staff and kind of failed miserably. We're kind of like a team of workaholics. We all suffer from the same, that same sort of, what's the word I want? Anyway, syndrome, I think was the word I was looking for. What we've realized is that in order to do this for the long haul, and you've heard me say before, that this pandemic is like a duration storm. It just keeps going on, and we keep getting waves. And the only way to endure that is to change our patterns. And so after Thanksgiving, we've instituted a 3-hour, once a week, 1 to 4 on Wednesdays, meeting-free zone. And every staff person can use that time however they want. They can use it to get caught up on work if they choose, but they're also free to take it as a break midweek. They're free to engage in a hobby or something that feeds their soul, or do something with a family member, just to mix it up. And it's time out and time away from the constant that we've been enduring. The other thing that we've put in place is from 4 to 5 on the other 4 days, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, we're just all observing desk time, so that we can all try and get a little bit, not caught up, because that's not going to happen, but a little bit less under the piles that accumulate each day. And those are just 2 things that we're trying, because we know that otherwise it won't be sustainable. So there's the pastoral conversations, there's the awareness, and then there's making changes, structurally to mix it up. Those are just some of the things. Bishop Ann, I'm sure you've got some others.
Well, first, in just the category of sort of some general, echoing Bishop Sam, what you just said, watching out for over-functioning, that because we're feeling anxious and that anxiety goes on, there's the temptation, well, if I'm anxious, I need to do something. And I think what we're trying to cultivate in the diocese is maybe doing less will actually allow us to do more. And so I realize that's a paradox, but there is something about slowing down, focusing, breathing, and saying, I don't think so. I don't, that saying no could be as faithful as saying yes. So I think there's the spirituality of less might actually give us more. And that's just something I have to talk with myself and my God about a lot. So I think some practical pieces of that is that I had to learn how to use functions on my computer, like timing when I send out my emails, talking more and more about we're not going to be working on a 24/7 availability. Clergy and lay leaders want to think of themselves as accessible, that's pastorally sensitive, to be constantly accessible. So learning how to say that to have some good boundaries is actually to take care of each other, and to respect good boundaries is actually to take care of one another. So I'm really just kind of repeating what Bishop Sam already said, but these are actually spiritual practices that I think can lead to more life. If it's not giving you energy and life, and there's just some things we have to do that don't give us energy and life, but the more we can minimize those things and maximize the things that really give us life, I think the longer we can do this with grace and receiving the Lord's good favor.
Well, thank you to you both. And also thanks to you for your comments in the chat box. I see you are demonstrating the great turkey debate, throwing down the questions on Brian or not to Brian, and Bishop Sam asking about the dressing and stuffing. And to that I say, yes, my entire turkey is nothing but a stuffing delivery system. So, so a question for you. How is it preaching on Zoom? Is it different than in person? And do you like it?
Well, we can both answer that in different ways because we may have different responses. I'll start and say, it's an acquired taste. I don't like not preaching where there aren't warm bodies in the room, period. But one of the things that I've learned over time in Zoom, and you keep learning as you go. But one of the things I've learned is that if you're preaching from a text, don't have it on a piece of paper where you have to look down at the paper because everyone just sees the top of your head. And in my case, that can be glaring. But what you can do, which I figured out after a while, is put your script up on your desktop next to the faces. And you can actually look at your text and look at the people and make eye contact and try and form that connection. In terms of the content of the message, I think stories are always important, and now they're even more important because that's the way that we find that that common ground and that place of connection, especially when we're trying to do that virtually. I think one of the other gifts of being in Zoom that I've learned over time is, and this may have less to do with preaching and more to do with the coffee hours afterwards, and the kind of questions and answers that we're doing now, which often happens when we're doing a Zoom coffee hour with a congregation, is that I not only look at people's faces, I look at what's in their background. And I mean, literally, like what's behind them? And is it a background that they've put up that's a favorite picture? Or is it a room in their house? And what do I see that piques my interest? And what can I learn about that person from their background? And I think that's just another way that through the medium, we're trying to find connection and trying to bridge that gap. The last thing I'll say for now about Zoom, the one thing I really don't like is I can never make eye-to-eye contact in this medium. And I think that's what I miss the most in this time of virtual worship, is the eye contact of seeing someone not just face to face, but when your eyes lock even for a moment, because that's part of the intimate connection that is the gift of beloved community. And I haven't found a way to make that happen in this medium.
So yeah, that has been probably, well, it's been extremely challenging to preach on Zoom, and there a lot of times we're asked to pre-record. Sometimes it's live stream, but most of the times it's pre-record, which I find particularly difficult for a whole set of reasons. One is that I've had several instances where it's been pre-recorded and then news events have intervened. Well, I can't update that sermon. And so there's just this sort of stepping out into space that's very uncomfortable. The other, going back to what I just said about less is more, I do believe what has always been true is shorter is better, and especially in Zoom land. And that is not my strength. Some of you all may know that. And so, but I've been experimenting a lot. Sometimes I still write the manuscript. Sometimes it's just the notes. A few times it's just mental notes. And I have to say it's just for me, it's been hard. It's been hard, but it has increased my spiritual discipline to put the sermon in God's hands. That, time after time, I feel disappointed. And then time after time, I remind myself it's not about me, and that there is no that God is doing more than I can ask or imagine, and somebody somewhere heard what they needed to hear. So this is sort of the insecurities that have come with preaching on Zoom have had to magnify my trust in the Lord that it's about God's message, not mine. So there's some, if not humiliation exactly, the humbling involved in this is probably good for me, but it's not particularly comfortable.
One quick footnote, because I loved your comment about shorter is better, which generally speaking, my sermons are in the 12, 13-minute range, whether live or on Zoom or Facebook. But recently, I had the experience of just getting caught up in what I was saying, and much to my horror, discovered afterwards, because you can go back if it's recorded and see how long you actually spoke. I preached a 23-minute sermon on Zoom. That was humiliating and humbling.
But your Methodist and Baptist friends were still thinking it was too short. So,
I think we can all sympathize what you have just shared about Zoom and the online world bringing us all out of our comfort zones. I know I can sympathize as I'm on Facebook Live right now. And for those who know me, that's not a role I play very often, but here. So I know we're running out of time. I think we have time for just one more question. And it's a nice one to end on, because this has been a very, very hard year, and it's had its share of challenges. But I think we can all agree that even in an atmosphere like that, there are gifts to be found. So the last question we are asking you today is, what is the greatest gift you've experienced this year?
I'm going to take a minute for that one. Bishop Ann, if you're ready, feel free.
So the greatest gift, one of the greatest gifts, is that this idea of the communion of the saints, to me, has really flowered in this time, as we've had to struggle with the ways that we can't be together, the ways we can't receive communion, all the irritating, disappointing, and anxiety provoking. At least in my in lifetime, I think I have felt a gift of connectedness. My 91-year-old mother figured out how to do Zoom, and her grandchildren made a part of it. That I think the idea that we are finding a way to be companions in the spirit, without minimizing. A gift for me, one of the greatest gifts for me, has been the prayer from Compline: keep watch, dear Lord, with those who work or watch or weep this night, and give your angels charge over those who sleep. Bless, tend the sick, Lord Christ. Bless the dying, soothe the suffering, comfort the afflicted, shield the joyous. I mean, so to me, we can do those things in prayer. We can do those things in our heart. We can do that. God will not be stopped. And I have companions. I have this incredible friendship, companionship with Bishop Sam, the diocesan staff, this diocese. I don't think I've ever been more aware of how relationships that have been nurtured over the decades are bearing fruit in a time of crisis. And that's just an amazing gift, an amazing gift.
I would love to build on that, because Bishop Ann, the connection you just made between the communion of saints, relational life, and prayer life is perhaps for me been the greatest gift in this time. And specifically, the way that that's played out is it's changed my prayer pattern, which often happens to me, in different stages and in different phases. And it's often happened when I've had a change in vocational life, but it can also happen when you have a change in circumstance, like the crisis that we've been living through and faithfully finding ways not just to survive, but really to thrive in spite of all that we've been managing together. And specifically, and I don't really have the language for this yet, other than what I would call strategic prayer. And the way that I would describe it is there are certain times when either a congregation or people that I'm working with or people in my family where the pressure has led to some conflict. And this is going to seem painfully simple because it's so obvious, but it never occurred to me before, that when there is a point of crisis or conflict, not just to intensify the prayer, but to actually, in my prayer, pray for the people in the long list of prayer, in the long prayer list I have of people I pray for. I've changed the order so that when two people are having a difficult time, maybe with each other, I pray for them one right after the other. And it seems like such a simple thing, and it may seem obvious to some, but it's not something I've done in the past. What I can say is that it has an impact, and I can't quite explain it, and I certainly don't take credit for it, but I do believe it matters. So that if there's a congregation that is going through a particular crisis, to name the crisis and to pray for the congregation. But more importantly, when there are two people or more that are going through a difficult time together, to pray for them and to move them, practically speaking, into the same space in my time of prayer. And something is, as a result of that, is being unlocked. And the only last thing I'll say is there's hope in that, I think, for the work that we have to do in this divided nation, where we're pulled apart in so many ways. I'm on the front end of this, but I like it when God invites me into something new, even in a time like this, because it gives me the opportunity to grow into that and to learn more about what God's invitation is, not just for me, but for us in weaving us back together.
Well, thank you, bishops, and thank you too for this last hour. I think, again, I ask everybody to join me in our gratitude. I think it's safe to say the fact that the two of you are willing to spend time like this, taking questions from any and all, goes a long way to demonstrating why we all still feel so connected in this time when we are being asked to be physically separate. So thank you. We are truly grateful to have both of you as our leaders.